All right, Larry, just because I'm going to stop that and start the meeting. Just because we're all getting the reason we're going to do this. So, all right. So with that, I think, Damon, are you ready over there?
I'm good, yeah, ready.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order for Thursday, February 24th, the meeting of the Turkey Meadows Regional Planning Commission. And I will start with the roll call.
All right, Kathleen Taylor, Kate Nelson, Kyle West,
Here.
Larry Chesney, Mark Johnson,
Here?
Peter Gower, Sarah Chavilicek, and I believe Scott Carey just walked in. Present. Here, and Shelley Reed. All right, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. Move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the salute to the flag. And just because Commissioner Carey walked in the door, I'm going to have him lead us. Whenever you're ready.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everyone. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I'm looking for a motion for approval on that. A motion from Commissioner Gower. Looking for a second. A second for Commissioner Chavilicek. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay. All right. Well, then moving on in our agenda, the next item is public comment. I will turn it over to the clerk for both the explanation of online public comment and let us know what we have this evening.
Of course, yeah. I will quickly share my screen, so if folks want to leave public comment via Zoom, you have that option. 1 second here. Got like a million windows open. Try to find the right one. Okay, so if you want to leave public comment and you want to do it via Zoom, you just simply go to teamrpa.org. And then you will see it right here on the front page. Just click here to access a digital public comment card. You will just then go through. We need to provide your first name, last name, email, the item you want to speak on. You can see the 2 general public items and then any specific item. And then indicate if you're going to be doing by video or phone. And then either way, provide your phone number just in case get disconnected or something happens. And then when you fill all of this out, it will take you to another page along with emailing you the information to get into the Zoom meeting. And if you want to leave comment on another item, you just have to go through the same process again and fill it out just like you would if you were in person, turning in a different public comment card, and that's it. Simple as that. Stop share. And we also, having said that, have no public comment. I've received none.
Public comment and move on to approval of the minutes from January 27th, 2022 Regional Planning Commission.
Mr. Chair, all 5 pages of the meeting minutes look good to me. I'd make a motion to approve the January 27, 2022 Regional Planning Commission meeting minutes as submitted.
I'll second that motion.
I didn't have my microphone on.
I think you're right.
so
I was just going to mention that as well.
I apologize for that. So I have a motion for Commissioner Carey and a second for Commissioner West on approval of the minutes. And I believe I will ask the clerk for a roll call vote on this item, please.
Of course. Kathleen Taylor. Kate Nelson. All right. Let me just note that real quick. Kyle West.
Yes.
Larry Chesney. Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Peter Gower. All right. Let me just note that real quick as well. Sarah Chavilicek. Oh, are you? Sarah Chavilicek for the minutes. You might be muted. Oh, no worries. Not Tori. Okay. Scott Carey, you made the motion. I presume you're going to say yes.
Yes.
And then last but not least, Shelley Reed. All right.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Great, so we will move on to the business of the day. Item 6A for possible action, a presentation on the Natural Resources Plan, data gathering update and engagement strategy. Director Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeremy Smith for the record. Excited to have Nate Kusha, our policy analyst, take us through a presentation about our progress towards the Natural Resource Plan.
And to the governing board and ultimately approved. In the end, that scope consisted of 2 phases, which you can see here. Phase 1 has been completed, and tasks 2 and 3 of phase 2 have begun. That's what we're going to kind of go over today. And task 4 is anticipated to begin next month. So for task 2, outreach and engagement, we have been working on this. Our team RPA staff, I should say, has been working on this. Cardo has been focusing on the data gathering effort, which we'll get to later on. So for this, the first thing we've done is created a series of self-guided field trips. These take participants on a tour of notable environmentally related subject sites throughout the Truckee Meadows. The first of these has been released on the Natural Resources Plan site. With more to follow in the coming months. We're also working on a series of surveys for input on the different categories for the plan, which you guys will see later on as well. And these will be, we're going to create an opt-in survey list for these surveys to release to, and we're going to really tailor the graphics of those surveys to match the Natural Resources Plan theme. Additionally, we have plans for some large forum engagement events, which will be held later this year. First of these will focus on the results of the data gathering process. And these are going to be held in outdoor venues, things like Rancho San Rafael or Idlewild, some of our other parks or open spaces, really to highlight the natural resources in our area and our green spaces. So here's a closer look at the first of the self-guided field trip series that we've created. As you can see here, it's kind of in these 3 columns. This is the online format here. It's also printable in kind of a brochure format. So we have different locations that we have selected throughout the area for different natural resource related reasons. So on this first side here, you can see the UNR Farms Main Station Field Lab was selected. And it has kind of a summary of these areas, highlights for them. As you can see, there's a map on the bottom left there. And we also have a little car icon there and the click here button. So if you access this digitally, you can click that and it'll give you a route map to hit all of the subject sites for this field trip. So for this one, we had the UNR Farms, and then we have Rosewood Nature Study Area and the Daybreak Development Area. So as you can see for each of those, there's a short description of the area, kind of what are the natural resource related kind of concerns or areas of interest related to these sites. And then we have addresses about the natural resource plan, et cetera. So as I said, this is kind of the first of a few of these that we're going to put out. and you guys can go ahead and take the field trip if you haven't already by going to the Natural Resources Plan site, and this is downloadable there. So moving on to task 3, the data gathering. So following the approval of that scope of work that we saw, us at Team RPA worked with Cardno to create a list of organizations to contact about possible natural resource data that they may be able to provide. So an email was sent by our very own Jeremy to each of these organizations asking for their participation in this effort by either providing data and or participating as a stakeholder. Further efforts were then made by our team over at Cardno, who are our consultants, by phone or email to contact those that didn't respond to that initial request. That helped to really increase the participation from these organizations. In the end, we got 70 organizations that we contacted. That was our kind of final list, 43 of which have responded so far, and 26 have provided paths to some form of data. As you can see on the chart here, we've completed kind of the data paths gathering from 30 of those organizations, and we're still working with another 13 to kind of gather how to have access to that data. And we're still waiting to hear from 27 of them. Hopefully we do. And then on the other chart on this slide, you can see kind of what that data was. So 23 of the 26 that provided data were spatial data, rather, and then 3 of those was more of a qualitative data that they were able to provide paths to. So through this effort, our team at Cardno has tracked all of the outreach, including all the organizations that were contact information for each organization, as well as the type of data available and a summary of the data. You can see kind of our tracking table here and some of the things that we're keeping track of. We have things such as what kind of data is it? What was the data? What was the intended use of the data? It's kind of a big one. And then also some preliminary information on how often is this data updated and how often will us at Team RPA have to check in to make sure that we have the most current data available. So this information will be used to further organize and synthesize all of the data gathered. And that's what we're coming up on next. So the data outreach is expected to kind of be wrapped up by the end of February, which will then be followed by our data organization and synthesis, as I mentioned, that will occur over the next several months. This will include things like identifying data gaps, doing a quality assessment of the data we've gathered. Cardno is going to give us a data collection synthesis memo. And finally, we at Team RPA are working on the creation of a natural resources plan data portal that will be hosted on our website. So while we know that the initial data outreach is kind of coming to a conclusion, the Natural Resources Plan is anticipated to be a living document, and we do know that going forward, we're going to have to do ongoing data collection and maintenance that will be really necessary as part of this plan. So with that, I mentioned how we're creating that natural resources data portal. This is kind of our first mock-up of that. Very own Damian Kerwin went in there and set this up. So as you can see here, this is a way to access all of our data. We have a brief description of the natural resources plan there. And then each of these icons down below correlates to one of our category areas for the plan itself. So within each of those categories, you can click one of those icons. It'll bring you to all of the data that we have gathered for that category area. So if we were to click on the outdoor recreation, we'll assumedly find things like the trail information, maybe some federal land information, things of that nature. And this will be accessible by the public. So anybody can kind of come in here and find all the data that we have gathered. Some of that may have restriction issues with things. So some of it may just be links to other entities where you can then request the data from them just for security reasons and et cetera. So this is free. We already have the capability of doing this through hosting it on our website and through our GIS licenses. So this is no extra cost to TMRPA, but going to be hopefully a great resource for the region as part of this plan. So with that, moving on to task 4, the policy implications. So along with the general public engagement efforts, we are planning to meet with our steering committee coming up in March. And we're then also going to be forming our 6 category area subcommittees to begin discussions around the topical narrative pieces for the plan. So the discussion and contextualization of topic areas within each category will help us to identify kind of policy direction and implications for the regional plan update upcoming. And we're hoping for you guys to participate on those subcommittees. And we're going to be reaching out to each of you to inquire about kind of what level of engagement you guys want to participate in. And also if you have any preferences for categories of subcommittees that we're going to be forming. So this is really, we're working on creating the actual document of the natural resources plan with those narratives, issues identifications, and whatnot. This is kind of going to be the readable portion of it. That's not data stuff. And like I said, really hoping that leads to policy changes for our next update. So with that, here are 6 category areas that we've come up with. We have the physical resources, biological resources, cultural and historical resources, outdoor recreation, sustainability and resiliency, and development and open land interaction. So this is kind of going to be how we're formatting the natural resource plan document by each of these category areas. Each of these categories is going to have a multitude of kind of topics within them. So if we move on to the next slide here, this is kind of what that looks like. So this is a rough kind of first draft matrix of our 6 category areas across the top there. And then as you can see on the left, these are sort of topics within each of those areas. So anything that has a black dot is the kind of primary category for that topic. And the gray dots, because all of these kind of topics are going to be cross-cutting across multiple of the category areas. So, and we understand that, we want to recognize that. So we also have the gray dots saying what else they'll probably fall into, and we'll have some discussion around, like for water, for instance, its main category is physical resources. That's where the bulk of the discussion is going to be and the write-up. However, there's going to be still some discussion about how water relates to outdoor recreation, sustainability, resiliency, etc. I just want to check in that you guys are hearing everything I'm saying, because I just got a unstable internet kind of warning. So I want to make sure you're not missing anything.
You're coming through just fine, Nate. Thanks.
Great. So like I said, this is our first pass at this. So we have some of these topics listed here, but there's going to be much more topics that we're going to discuss that are going to fall into multitude of these categories. So with that, we have kind of 2 different category subcommittees that we're going to be starting with. The first of those is going to be the physical resources category. One of the reasons we're starting with this is that Team RPA has been working with the Nevada Department of Environmental Protection, as well as Resource Concepts Incorporated and a variety of other organizations on creating a voluntary source water protection program in Washoe County. So through this effort, we're able to create the visualization tool that is a map to help agencies in the region kind of visualize different source water protection sheds, I think is what we're calling them. Jeremy can correct me if I'm wrong on the terminology there. But this is really just to help be more informed about our source water and our water in the region and contaminants therein. This is hosted on WashoeCountyCleanWater.org. You can go and check the map out there in the tool. And so we've already done kind of a robust effort in doing some data work here and visualization, as well as working with these organizations. So because of that, we have a good kind of basis and foundation to start working on the physical resources category, especially as it relates to source water protection. So that'll be one of our first takes, and hopefully help build a framework for the rest of the topic areas and category subcommittees to see how we did this one and how we can move forward with those ones. In addition to that, Team RPA worked with Truckee Meadows Tomorrow and some other organizations, the Eastern Sierra Trails Coalition and EDON being some of those, to establish a regional trails plan. and we did some associated data work there as well. You can see kind of a map here on the right. And this was taking an inventory of different trails and trailheads, and really cultivated a system of connected and direct routes. This, yet again, was a fairly robust effort, and it helps to establish the hiring of a regional trails coordinator with Washoe County through the Truckee Meadows Parks Foundation. So that's kind of a cool thing. So we're going to be working with that regional trails coordinator as well as the others we worked with on this, and using, yet again, this data that we set up here in this tool to be a basis for starting our outdoor recreation category subcommittee. I'm working through that one as well. So with that, I'm going to go through now just kind of a rough timeline of what the kind of coming year looks like for the Natural Resources Plan. So we skipped ahead here. What's happening? Sorry, give me a minute. It won't. There we go. Okay, so starting this month, we have been crafting our broad intro survey. It's going to be our first survey to be released. We're reaching out to subcommittee members to get those formed and start on these category subcommittees, as I mentioned. We're going to begin the assessment of data that we've gathered from these different organizations. And we're here tonight talking to you guys about an update. So next month, we're working, going to set up something with the steering committee, get them re-engaged, right? And then we're going to be releasing that first survey. And as I mentioned, work through those first kind of topic areas in those subcommittees, the trails, the source water, get those started, have a basis. And we'll be back again to you guys next, this memo from Cardinal, these sort of things. So you can see kind of what this data looks like, have more of an understanding of the portal, how that's work, how we're going to be able to access this data, et cetera. Moving on from there, farther out we get, the more fuzzy it gets, but we're going to be, releasing another one of the field trips. We're going to give an update about all of this, plus what we talk about with you guys next month to the governing board in April. We're going to continue to host our subcommittee meetings. We have planned in May to have that first large forum event. We're looking into booking in Rancho San Rafael for that one. So hopefully some of you guys can come attend that. And then moving on, we're going to continue to release our surveys, continue to host our subcommittee meetings, and then later this year in the summer, start really getting to the nitty-gritty of writing our narratives, which will hopefully be leading to our policy implications, as I mentioned, for that 2024 update. So with that, what to expect upcoming. We're going to be working through the data synthesis, as I mentioned, organizing all that data, putting it into our portal, getting everything we can to get this data comprehensible to us, to jurisdictions, and eventually hopefully to the public. We're working through our category subcommittees, updating you guys again in March, updating the governing board in April. So with that, that's all I got. That was a lot. Do you guys have any questions? I'm here, I can answer some. Jeremy, I'm sure, can answer questions as well about this. And proposed motion is on the slide otherwise.
All right. Thank you, Nate.
Excuse me, Commissioner Chesney. Hey, Nate, why is the Daybreak site a stopping point in this thing?
Yeah, so with the Daybreak development, there were some kind of concerns as they relate to natural resources. They are going to be kind of moving the, I believe it's the Steamboat Creek channel. Yeah. And so that's something to consider, things of that nature. It's also one of our category areas is kind of development and open land interactions, right? And so looking at Daybreak from that perspective, we can say, okay, well, is this maybe a better spot than others to put a development or not, right? Things of that nature. Is it closer in, farther out? Is it taking maybe federal lands in the future? Whatever it may be, right? That's one of the reasons we put Daybreak in there. I don't know if Jeremy has anything to add to that, but it's kind of what we think.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Because it's a controversial site, and I guess whether approved, regardless of how it was approved, it is a controversial site. So I think it's a good move. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Commissioners, additional questions or comments?
This is Sarah.
Got her hand up. Okay.
Yes, this is Sarah. I'm just asking planning staff, when you talked about Main Station, did you take into account that on the McCarran side, the frontal property, that's now being covered with non-permeable surface? Has there been an analysis on runoff, and if that Main Station is still the retention basin that you hope it to be?
So with our kind of field trips, as we've set them up, we haven't done any sort of analysis on the sites that we've looked at. We just know that there are concerns. We know that the Main Station area over there is kind of a flood retention area, things of that nature. So we put those concerns in there. We have a little write-up about the Main Station area. And like I said, it's not really an analysis. It's just to get people out there thinking about what are the natural resource concerns in our area, where they might be, and we're hoping just to kind of provide some examples of that so people can get out and see what's going on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chvillicek. Commissioner Taylor, I see you have your hand raised.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm using technology. Commissioner Taylor, Nate, I would just say to you and your team, from what I recall, there was a very limited budget for this project. So it really looks like you guys are doing a fantastic job with the consulting team. Thank you for what I would say maximizing resources and efficiency, and looking forward to the next steps and being involved.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate it. Yeah, our team over at Cardno has been a big help reaching out to all these organizations and gathering a lot of that data. So hopefully we can get them back in to talk to you guys sometime in the future about kind of what they went through and how that all unfolded.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, additional questions? Commissioner Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nate, thanks for the update. Very excited to see this project moving forward. 2 questions. I saw on the website there was a mention about some sort of like a lesson plan or something involving the schools with this effort. I was wondering if you might be able to talk a little bit about that. And then I was also curious about the timing and what you need from us as commissioners with respect to helping out with the categories and subcommittees.
Yeah, I'll let Jeremy answer the schools question first, and then we can talk about the subcommittees.
Sure, thanks. Great question, Commissioner Carey. This is Jeremy for the record. We have had some initial discussions with the school district. We actually mocked up an exercise that was kind of a drawing exercise and a bit of a description of what mattered to students. I think we may have showed you that. We had some advice from Danny, Ray, who thought maybe we should target 6th graders, and so that was kind of the same. That concept went well with the school district folks when we talked to them. Their main concerns were that they didn't want just a one-off. They wanted something that melded with their curriculum. And so that's kind of the point we're at right now. We've reached back out to them, and we were hoping to get something this spring. Doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So we're going to kind of redouble our efforts, see if we can maybe add a Google Earth mapping component. That might be something that their science and tech that could help make it a little more curriculum-based, and try to re-engage, but it's sort of, to be honest, sort of stalled right now with the school district.
Great, thank you. Happy to hear about that. I think that's exciting.
Yeah, so to answer your question about the subcommittees, we're going to be reaching out to each of you guys individually, probably, hopefully next week, if not in just the next couple weeks, just to kind of see what your interest is as far as participation level, if you want to be on one of the category subcommittees, and then what your preference is for the what the topic of that category is, right? And so we'll be reaching out to each of you guys, and we're hoping that we can have at least one of you on each of our category area subcommittees, but of course, it's dependent on if you guys want to participate at that level or not. It's totally up to you guys, but be expecting an email from us soon about that.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Carey. Commissioner West?
No
Okay.
question.
Commissioners, any additional questions or discussion? If not, we do have I believe, a potential motion to accept the report and provide any feedback based on that. So, Commissioners, I'd be looking for that motion.
Mr. Chair, I'm ready to make a motion.
Commissioner Gower, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I move to accept the report as provided by staff, including the discussion that was had during this agenda item this evening, and want to echo Commissioner Taylor's compliments to staff and the consultant on the great work they've done so far.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Gower.
Commissioner Taylor, I'll second.
And I have a motion from Commissioner Gower and a second from Commissioner Taylor. I'm pretty sure I don't need a roll call vote on this one, Damian. So I do want to just, before I take that, again, echo everything. I think this is moving along great. I appreciate what's going on there. And I did have to give Director Smith a little bit of a hard time. You changed the cultural and historic resources dinosaur icon, which I was very excited about, to a mastodon, or which I believe is a little more appropriate, but I just wanted to point out that, yeah, the joy, my 5-year-old self looking at that brontosaurus on there was a little bit disappointed when it changed to the mastodon. But other than that, kudos to you on that. So with that little humorous break, I would ask all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Nate and staff, again, thank you. Good work.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we are going to move on to the next business of the day, item B, RPC training segment, presentation and discussion of Regional Planning Commission bylaws. I believe I'm going to turn this one over to Jessica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jessica Prunty for the record. Nate's going to be a tough act to follow. I don't think my topic area is nearly as riveting as his.
Dinosaur pictures.
That's what I'm missing. Anyway, I'm here at the request of Commissioner Carey. Several meetings ago, I'd requested an overview of the RPC bylaws. Earlier today, I provided you a brief document that's essentially a summation of your bylaws, and I'm going to go over that briefly today. Essentially, bylaws are to utilize with various organizations. Private organizations, public bodies. They are guiding documents of essentially how the organization operates, their operating processes. In regards to public bodies, some are mandated to have bylaws by their statutes, some are not. The RPC is not required to have bylaws under your statutes, but it voluntarily adopted bylaws back in 2000 at the early stages of the agency. And your bylaws in particular are mostly focused on meetings and the processes therefore. The most recent amendment of the bylaws happened in May of 2010, which when I was reviewing and preparing this presentation, provoked a little bit of thought that maybe it's time to take a look and do a comprehensive review and potentially make recommendations for changes. I'm going to undertake that myself and bring back recommendations at the next meeting. And I welcome any commission members that are so inclined if you review the bylaws, and if you have any suggestions, please feel free to reach out to me individually, and I'll fold that in and bring it back. And you guys can make a decision whether you want to make some changes or not. In essence, your bylaws are broken into 9 different sections. The general section is pretty straightforward. It just kind of covers some basic duties and responsibilities of the members of the commission, reiterates your obligations to comply with the ethical standards for public officers in NRS Chapter 281. It talks about how members of the commission are appointed, which pretty much for the most part mirrors existing statutes. And there's also a use of staff provision in these bylaws. I guess at some point in time or not, they wanted to ensure that no commission members would be monopolizing staff time on pet projects. So I suspect that's why that is in there. I believe there's also a similar one for the RPGB. And then moving on to the next section is essentially attendance and what constitutes a quorum and voting requirements. Interestingly, I thought that essentially if you're going to have any item on the agenda that requires a 2/3 vote, you don't have a quorum unless we have 6 members of this body present. Otherwise, it just only has to be 5 members of the body present. It also kind of reiterates what's already in statute as far as voting requirements for 2/3 votes and which actions require a 2/3 vote of the body. And then there's a process, it sets forth processes for motions, and some of this is fairly interesting. This body doesn't utilize a wide variety of these motions. It took me back to Robert's Rules of Order and parliamentary procedure from my high school days, and public speaking in our meetings and various high school organizations, motion for a previous question or division of the question, and kind of complex parliamentary procedure processes that generally aren't utilized, but they're certainly available to the body in the meantime. I did want to call to your attention, though, a few of the motions. The motion to table, which is essentially allows you to bypass the subject. It has to be brought up at the next meeting, though. You have to take it from the table at that time. And then a motion to continue, which has been utilized by this body from time to time. And when you do make a motion to continue, you are supposed to specify the next date that motion, the matter will come back to the body. And then the next section talks about meetings of this body. A lot of this is prefatory materials of where you have to post, open meeting law requirements, and essentially, again, reiterations of what's already in state statute. It also hits on various other topics of special meetings, emergency meetings. From time to time, this body has had special meetings, and of course, the public hearings that are required whenever we do an update to the plan. And I believe maybe we might potentially utilize those processes for the natural resources plan, depending upon the timing for the adoption of that. It may or may not. I think originally it was envisioned to sync with the next 5-year update, but if it's done sooner, my recommendation was that we would go through that public hearing process set forth for a major update or amendment of the plan so that we can engage the public to the greatest extent possible. It also talks about the agenda, and the chair sets the agenda, and essentially sets forth the order of business in the agenda, which this organization follows fairly closely. What I also thought was interesting is the processes set forth for the conduct of a public hearing, which is also followed quite routinely by this body. But it's helpful, I think, for anyone who has any kind of questions or confusion of how is a public hearing conducted, what's the difference between a public hearing and a regular business of the day item. So I would invite you to review that process on page 11 of your bylaws. Most of this falls upon the chair. I think the bylaws for the chair of the commission is really the tool that they can utilize to give them guidance in presiding over the meeting and kind of the do's and don'ts. One thing that's nice, and it comes much later in the bylaws, is if you happen to not be following the bylaws precisely, that doesn't mean that any action of the body is invalidated. So there's definitely a relief valve there. I also found interesting the decorum provisions of what's expected of the members of this commission and the members of the individuals who are present at the meetings, and that there is an expected level of decorum and cordiality expected of everybody. And I don't think, in my experience, that's not been an issue here, but sometimes tempers do run hot, and it's always good to be mindful that there is an expectation in a bylaw addressing your conduct. Another section is basically talking about the officers of the commission and how they are who are the officers and how their succession and election is determined. You have 2 officers on the RPC, the chair and the vice chair, and then we have the de facto non-voting secretary, who is the director of regional planning or his designee. They also sets forth when the elections of officers will take place, which is in July 1 of each year, with the new officers taking office at the next meeting. And it also reiterates what's in statute of the rotation of the chair and vice chair amongst the jurisdictions who are represented on the commission. The bylaws also touch on, reiterating requirements of the public records laws as far as maintenance of records and documents and accessibility of those records and documents to the commission members and the public in general. And there's also provisions for keeping minutes of the meetings in accordance with the open meeting law, and providing those copies of the minutes and seeking approval of the commission. There's provision for how to go about amending the bylaws, which we may or may not be utilizing here in the near future. And then, of course, the clause that I alluded to earlier, if you inadvertently don't follow one of the rules or violate a rule, your action's not invalidated so long as it's otherwise compliant with applicable laws. Section 7 is more of an informational section. It talks about when there's an appeal of a decision of this body to the Regional Governing Board and what the Regional Governing Board may do. This is probably something everyone is already aware of, but the Governing Board can affirm your decision, they can reverse your decision, they can remand your decision back to the body for further fact-finding or reconsideration. And then the Governing Board can also make direct recommendations to project applicants to revise their initial application to bring it into compliance. And lastly, there's an Exhibit 1, which is a table prepared to give guidance on target timelines as far as when proposals are submitted to the agency, when they need to come up to this body, circulation and drafting of agendas, approval of the agendas, posting of the agendas, public hearing postings, staff report postings, and distribution of the packet. And these are, again, I wouldn't say they're aspirational, but they're targets, indeed, and not binding deadlines in any sense of the word. And without any further ado, I would welcome any questions that individual members of the commission may have. And again, extend the invite for anyone to reach out to me if they have suggestions for changes to the bylaws, and I'll bring back recommendations at your next regularly scheduled meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. So I think what you're saying is I shouldn't have been commenting about the dinosaur icon, is what I'm hearing.
Would you like a dinosaur icon?
No, I do not. I'm thinking I may have violated something there.
No, you did not.
Commissioners, are there any questions or comments on the presentation we've just heard? Not seeing any raised hands on the screen. Commissioners in chambers, any questions? Commissioner Carey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Jessica, for your work on this and the training tonight. One question I did have, and I wasn't sure, kind of skimming through the bylaws, do the bylaws currently allow for or address electronic or telephonic participation in commission meetings, or are we kind of reverting back to whatever's allowed in state law to that respect?
No, you raise a good point, Commissioner Carey. No, they do not currently address that. And I think that's, given the fact that they haven't been updated in 12 years, is probably why. And we've certainly evolved, and as has technology. And I think that might be something that would be appropriate to add in there to talk about, participation telephonically or otherwise. And of course, that is provided for, and there was many changes, of course, made to the open meeting law when going as a result of the pandemic that allows for that participation in a more robust fashion. So I think that would be an appropriate thing to add in, absolutely.
Great. I have no further questions, Mr.
No.
Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Carey.
Thank you, Commissioner Carey. Any additional questions? Okay. Seeing none. Jessica, thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
And,
You have now
Commissioners-
fulfilled another training segment.
Excellent.
Log it in.
Excellent. Appreciate that. Okay. Then we will move on to item number 7, reports. I will ask if there's any members' reports prior to any comments from the members. Commissioner Carey?
I had one just really quick one. Just wanted to throw it out there. The National Planning Conference is going to be held in San Diego this year for the American Planning Association. I think it's May 18th through the 20th. It's kind of a different format this year. There's an in-person, and then there's also a virtual component too. The in-person is going to be held the 18th through the 20th, and then after that, there's a virtual only attendance option. So just want to throw out there for more information, planning.org. Registration is open. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Carey. Okay. Director Smith, director's reports.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeremy Smith for the record. So a couple things to report today. Our next meeting will be Thursday, March 24th in this chamber or via Zoom, which seems to be working out pretty good. It was great to hear about the natural resource plan progress today, and excited to engage more on the subcommittees. Now, we have a couple of other projects that are sort of kicking off or have started, and I've mentioned it before. One of them is our consensus forecast, which is done every 2 years. So I've basically been in contact with the 4 sources that we've used historically in gathering that information. That's in process right now. And as soon as I have the 4 sources in hand and can create a draft, then my plan is to engage what previously was called the Spatial Disaggregation Working Group, but I got to work on that group name. That's terrible. But get basically staff from the local jurisdictions and affected entities together to discuss the projection and where we're going in some of our land use modeling that's resulting from that. So that's happening. And then also, we are next week going to be having some conversations with staff at the local jurisdictions, planning staff, around the Truckee Meadows annual report and how that process, how we've been kind of evolving that ask over the past couple of years, and is leading us to the public infrastructure investment planning process, which will have a similar kind of goal as the natural resources plan in terms of building a basis, a foundation of understanding and information that will lead us to enhancements to policy in the regional plan. And so we also will be asking you, for your participation on probably some subcommittees around key topic areas. I know, we have different expertise on the commission. Not everyone has to serve in the natural resource realm, but you're all invited. But likewise, we'll be looking for your help in the infrastructure realm too. So you can stay tuned for that. That one's just a little bit behind where we are in natural resources in terms of time frame, but it's happening. I think, let's see, the other thing I'd like to report on is on March 10th, we're going to have another meeting of the Regional Planning Governing Board Subcommittee on Projects of Regional Significance. And so that process is moving forward. We're basically still kind of uncovering the history of why changes have been made over time to the PRS guidelines. What was the impetus behind that to kind of help us inform how we may want to make changes, or how the RPGB may want to recommend to this body that actually controls the guidelines, what changes they'd like to see. And, there's been conversations about schools, but it's certainly not limited to schools. So it's not like the fastest process that's ever happened, but you can expect that there is progress being made, and it will be coming back to this body to actually address updates to the guidelines at a future meeting, start that process. I guess with that, I will stop talking. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Director Smith. Any questions on that? Okay. Next item is the legal counsel report. Jessica, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing to report tonight.
Okay.
Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Okay, item number 8, requests for future agenda items. Commissioners, any requests? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 9, public comment. Damien, have we received any this evening?
We have not. There is none.
And I see nobody in chambers, so we will close public comment. Any written correspondence?
There is none.
Okay. With that, I will move on to item 11, adjournment.
Commissioner Chesney, move to adjourn.
Commissioner Gower, second.
Thank you very much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Good night.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.